My husband fell in love with my sister and we're getting divorced. I thought that was bad until my parents told me to get over it and forgive her so we could be a family again. Now I have no family at all. My husband and my sister's relationship has changed and it's making me uncomfortable. He tells me that I'm imagining things, but this nagging feeling won't go away. 8 months ago, my sister Lana moved back to town after 10 years away. She left right after high school, and though we'd catch up maybe once a year, we'd drifted apart. I hadn't seen her in person in 4 years. In the meantime, I met and married Nick, my husband of 3 years. He's a quiet, reserved man, and he opens up only with a few close friends or around me. Lana had a tough time finding a job here, so thinking I was helping, I asked Nick if he could check if there was an opening at his company. They worked in similar fields, and I thought he might be able to help her out. Turns out, he did find her a position. And not only that, but they work in the same department now. Over the past few months, though, Nick has seemed a bit distant. Nothing huge, just little things. Coming home late, quieter dinners, more short answers to our conversations. Anytime I asked if something was wrong, he'd tell me I was imagining things, that everything was fine. I wanted to believe him, but the doubts kept creeping in. Christmas came around, and we had our usual family dinner. Strangely, Nick tried to get out of it, something he'd never done before. After some convincing, he finally came, but from the start, he seemed uncomfortable. I kept catching him and Lana in these quiet, intense conversations off to the side. Each time I approached, they'd pause, and I'd ask what they were talking about. Just work stuff, near a deadline, one of them would say, shrugging it off. But the small things added up. At one point, he went to grab a drink from the kitchen, and she was seated nearby. As he walked past, her hand went up, and he reached out, lightly brushing her palm before continuing on his way. She looked up at him with a big smile, and he gave her a nod. Then, as if she knew I was watching, she turned her head and smirked at me. It wasn't even subtle. It was like a punch to the gut. When dinner came, Lana chose to sit at a smaller table off to the side. Nick, ignoring the empty seat beside me, sat down across from her. The two of them were wrapped in conversation, as if they were the only ones in the room. I couldn't help it. I took my plate and joined them at the side table. The second I did, they both went silent. Their sudden quietness more unnerving than the talking. After dinner, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I asked him outright what that hand-touching thing was about. He shrugged and mumbled something about it being a high five. A high five? My stomach twisted. It hadn't looked like one at all. He brushed it off, saying that was all it was, but it didn't sit right with me. And then there was the constant texting. Anytime I saw him on his phone, she'd be glancing down at hers too, sometimes sneaking looks across the room at him. The doubts, the distance. It all started to feel like a mountain of little things building into something bigger. I wanted to believe that I was just reading too much into it, but it felt like something more. Something that wasn't just in my head. So now here I am, questioning everything. Update. It's been a whirlwind few weeks since my last post. After sharing my suspicions about my husband, Nick, and my sister Lana, I felt a gnawing need to confront him in a private, focused setting. So I suggested a weekend getaway, just the two of us, away from our phones, distractions, and, most importantly, her. We headed up to a quiet cabin in the mountains, and the first night went off without a hitch. For a moment, it was like old times, and I almost forgot my fears. The next morning, as we sat by the lake, I finally gathered the courage to ask about his connection with Lana. His face drained of color, and that's when I knew. He admitted he'd fallen in love with her. He said it had started slowly, their common interests drawing them together, but quickly snowballed into something more. I feel like I can tell her anything, he confessed, and she just gets me. Then, with a sadness I'd never seen in his eyes before, he admitted that he'd never felt this way about me, even at our best. My heart shattered, but somehow I found the strength to ask him what he wanted to do about it. He didn't hesitate. He wanted out. He explained he couldn't pretend with me anymore, that his love for her had changed everything. He apologized, but his words barely registered. I was numb. We sat there in the stillness, and I could almost hear the cracks spreading through the life we'd built together. The next few days were a blur. We agreed to split everything, and in a twisted act of generosity, he offered me the house and most of the proceeds from the sale. I told him to keep it. I wanted no part of the memories it held. I began packing up my things, arranging for the movers, and found a small rental nearby. Starting fresh feels like the only thing keeping me grounded right now. But I know healing will be a long road. But Lana? She took things to a whole new level. Almost immediately, she began flaunting their relationship, posting photos of the two of them laughing, hugging, even kissing. And then, just to twist the knife, she accidentally sent me a photo, smiling smugly as he kissed her forehead. She changed her profile picture to it too. And when I asked Nick to get her to stop, he said he talked to her, but nothing changed. I've since unfollowed her on everything. Our family's reaction has been equally heartbreaking. My mother, shockingly, seems to think I'm overreacting, saying Lana isn't posting to hurt me and that she deserves happiness too. According to her, I need to stop being petty by even looking at Lana's posts. My dad, thankfully, has shown more understanding. He's chosen to stay neutral, but made it clear he doesn't support their relationship. He told me he's there if I need anything, though he won't intervene directly. Right now, I'm in a fog, and I've cut contact with everyone except for Nick as we finalize the divorce. As for Lana and Nick, they've requested transfers to a different city to avoid running into me, though they won't be able to move until there's an opening. I plan on going completely no contact after all is settled. I'm still up in the air in regards to my mother. I don't think I will be able to get over her seemingly taking my sister's side on this, so I might end up cutting her out too, but I'm trying to give her a chance to come around. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice. It's been a lifeline through this nightmare. Final update. It's been a few months since everything came crashing down, and I thought things couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. I tried to hold on to whatever family ties I had left, hoping for some sense of comfort. But the more I spoke to my parents, the more I realized I was clinging to a fantasy. At first, I'd gone low contact with my mother, choosing to keep conversations polite but shallow. I didn't have it in me to relive the agony every time she defended Lana. Yet, she didn't hold back, constantly trying to justify Lana's actions, saying things like, "Lana didn't mean to hurt you, dear." Or, she was just trying to find happiness. Happiness? By ripping apart her own sister's marriage? By flaunting it all over social media? One evening, I decided to finally stand up to her. I asked Mom, "What would you do if Dad had done this to you? If he'd betrayed you with someone you trusted?" She just stared at me for a moment, then sighed and said, "It's different, sweetie. You need to forgive her eventually. She's your sister." That's when I realized she didn't care about my pain, only about keeping the peace. I knew then that she'd never truly see the devastation this caused me. As for my dad, he's always been more understanding. But when I told him how Mom was making excuses for Lana, he just mumbled something about family unity and how we should all move past it for the sake of keeping things civil. I felt like screaming. Civil? They wanted me to play nice, sit around a table with the two people who destroyed my life, and pretend everything was okay? The breaking point came last week. My mother called, sounding oddly cheerful, and told me that she and my dad had invited Lana and Nick to dinner. "We all need to sit down and work this out like adults," she said, as if this whole thing was just a petty disagreement. "Maybe you could come too, darling, and we can talk this out. Try to let go of this anger." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I'd been willing to let my family hold on to whatever relationship they wanted with Lana, just to keep some semblance of normalcy, but this was too much. So I'm supposed to sit across from the man who shattered my life, and my own sister, who betrayed me, and act like everything's fine. How can you ask me to do that? But she just sighed and replied, "You're only making it harder on yourself by holding on to resentment." In that moment, I realized I didn't have a family anymore. Not the one I thought I had, anyway. They were so focused on maintaining this perfect picture of family unity that they were blind to my pain, brushing off the worst betrayal of my life as if it were nothing. So, I've made the decision to cut them off. It wasn't easy, but I've blocked my mom's number, and I've told my dad I won't be in contact for the foreseeable future. I've moved into my new place, a tiny cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by wildflowers and a view of the mountains. It's peaceful, and for the first time in months, I feel a strange sense of relief. The road ahead is daunting. I've lost my husband, my sister, and my parents all in one devastating sweep, but I'm done letting people who claim to love me chip away at my self-worth. I'll rebuild, one small step at a time. It's just me now, and that's okay. I'm finding strength in my solitude, and I'm beginning to believe that I can carve out a life where I'm happy again, maybe even better than before. I'll be free from the weight of people who refuse to see me. And as I watch the sunset over the mountains tonight, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Hope.